Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corey Rosen, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, The
Yeah,
Story.
congratulations, man.
Thank you so much. I'm with Conrad Fisher. He's an incredible songwriter who was also nominated for Best Songwriter at the CPMAs the past few days.
Yeah, and I'm glad I didn't get it because Hunter deserved it this year, man. He works his tail off and he blew up on TikTok this year. So I'm proud of Hunter and happy to know him. And he definitely deserved to get Songwriter of the Year.
Absolutely, Hunter Root is an amazing person. He's got some really cool projects coming up. I'm going to have him here in the studio not
Cool.
too long, so we'll get
Nice.
to learn more about that.
Yeah.
But today, I got you.
Yeah, man.
And you're an incredible person in your own right. This Pennsylvania-born singer and a songwriter grew up in a Mennonite household where his dad played Johnny Cash records and where the young Fisher learned how to love the harmonies of the church he attended. In 2018, Fisher went to Nashville to seek out his songwriting heroes like Roger Cook, Dickie Lee, Dallas Frazier, and Bill Anderson, among others. Still based in Pennsylvania, Fisher is an accomplished carpenter and spends his time in his workshop building things for his family and friends. Conrad, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Happy to be here. That last part's actually a lie. I just quit my carpentry gig. The last carpentry gig I did was in August. So I don't have to do that no more.
Is that something you missed, or is that a good thing?
Well, I just do it for fun now, but no, I don't miss it because like I have this song called "Trouble with a Hammer." I prefer not to swing a hammer. It's funner to swing a hammer when you don't have to. How's that?
Yeah,
So it's like taking me a long time to be able to not have to do that. I shouldn't just do music all the time. So I guess I need to update the old bio.
So let's back it up to the beginning. You were born in a Mennonite household, and you said you listened to Johnny Cash. Is that where your love of music started, or?
I don't know where my love of music started, man. I mean, I don't remember not being able to play and sing. But yeah, I grew up in a Mennonite church. Well, I'm still Mennonite, man. I'm kind of ill behaved, but I mean, I'm missing church today, and it's Palm Sunday. But no, but my dad loved music, and he doesn't play music, but Johnny Cash was one of his favorite artists, and it was the one that like we weren't supposed to listen to instrumental music growing up because of the church we went to. Oh yeah, man, it's super conservative. Yeah, you may laugh and ask questions.
Yeah, I want to ask questions.
That one. Go ahead.
So here at the Bible College, I know there's all the range of you shall not play music except for the Psalms or whatever. What is the Mennonite culture that you grew up in?
Well, I mean, Mennonite is like saying back, like there's a wide spectrum of it, but what I grew up in was like pretty conservative, and the church I was born in where we were when I was a kid, they weren't allowed to own musical instruments, and absolutely no recorded music unless it was a cappella. So
Really?
yeah, so I still go to church, but we don't have instruments in church. All our singing is a cappella, and therefore we're really good singers. And yeah, because you have to be. If you don't sing, it sucks.
Yeah, right.
And I actually is one of my favorite parts about church is that like I don't like modern worship music. I shouldn't say that in this studio, but it's not my thing, right?
I concert style worship is a little weird.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I know there's people called to that, and it's all good, but it's just not my thing. But yeah, so I grew up loving that kind of music, and then but Johnny Cash was always kind of like the exception to the rule. For some reason, we just always had a Johnny Cash CD, and even when we weren't really supposed to. And yeah, and then we moved to a less conservative church that allowed us to have instruments and those kinds of things when I was maybe 6 or 7, but still very conservative. We weren't supposed to be professional musicians, that kind of thing. So I wasn't the bishop's favorite kid. I'm still not. That's all right.
So when did you defy orders and pick up a guitar?
Well, my pop had a rule that before he bought you a guitar, you had to learn piano, and I think it was just a thing of he wanted to make sure I was serious about something. You know how kids are like, "Oh, I wanna play the tuba," and then you get them a tuba, and then they play it once and say, "I don't wanna play the tuba anymore." So he was trying to avoid that. So I played. I don't remember not being able to play piano, like, so I don't know, I'd have to ask my mom, I guess. But I think it was, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, because we had one of those little air organs, which we weren't supposed to have either, but it was do you know what I mean? That was an old
Yeah,
it was like
yeah.
a brown it was like, "Na, na, na, na," But anyways, so that's what I learned on. But I don't remember not being able to walk up to a piano and pick out a tune. Um, but then, so I learned how to do that, and then my uncle Henry gave me my first real guitar, but that one had two drywall screws stuck in the neck because it was cracked at the heel, and half the strings were nylon because it couldn't stand the tension. And then, so I learned to play it on that, and then my dad, I think it was my 13th birthday. My dad said he came downstairs and he was like, "What do you want for your birthday, man?" And I said, "I want a guitar." And, like, not expecting to get it. Like, I was just like, "That's actually what I want." And he said, "Okay, let's go." And I lost my mind. We went to I think it was Menchie's Music. Is there Menchie's Music?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
Anyway, so I got this black Fender, and that was my first real guitar. So that was, yeah, so I maybe started playing maybe when I was 12, playing guitar, which is I consider my main instrument now.
So what did you do with that? Did you join the band or join the church as a worship singer or
Oh,
what?
no, dude, we didn't have worship church. I mean, we're like,
At that
no
time,
instruments,
okay.
no, still not. I still go to a
Oh,
church
wow.
where we sing a cappella on Sunday.
So what'd you do?
Yeah. Well, my brother my brother plays banjo, and my sister plays violin. And so we kinda played together, and, um, I had my dad bought me a little recording setup, and I had it in the tobacco barn. We have an old tobacco barn on the property I grew up, and so I had one corner there, and I had a little keyboard and, some jankety guitars, and so I started kinda making music like that just for the fun of it. Um, some real garbage recordings, but it was fun. And I remember it used to be so cold up there in the wintertime. I had to have a heater because it wasn't insulated. It's just, tobacco barns are meant to move air through to
Right,
dry
right.
tobacco, so it was cold. And I would play keyboard, with a coat on and a heater blowing at me, and anyways, so that's how creatively I express myself, at that age. You can just go down a rabbit hole if you're, playing music by yourself. And there were a couple local bands that wanted me to be musicians, but my dad didn't think it was a great idea for me to be on stage, at that age, which I hated him for at the time. But in retrospect, it was like, yeah, man, human beings are not made to be on stage. It's the worst thing in the world. I mean, it's like, I don't think. I mean, to stand in front of 1,000 people and have them clap for you is not healthy. I don't care how used to it you get.
Mm.
I don't think it is, and especially when you're 16, and you show me a sane 16-year-old anyways.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean?
of course,
It's like your
yes.
brain's developing, and this is not smart. And that ticked me off, man. I didn't hate my dad for that, but it was,
You
um,
hold it against them.
I was a little bit like, "Come on, man." But and then when I was about, I guess it was about 18, 17 or 18, he did let me join a local band, because they were good guys, and yeah, that's when I started playing out.
So, let's go back to the Mennonite. Do you know exactly why, like, the theology behind the no instruments in the church?
I mean, some of that stuff is just cultural, and
Oh, okay.
it's just so wie wir dienen, that's just how we do. That's just the way it is, and there's not really I mean, they'd have scripture for it, but then it's like, really, I'm always like, David was playing the harp and the lyre, and,
Right,
it's
yeah.
kinda hard to, but it's
Just the way it
no.
is.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. And by the way, as we go through this, some people are scared to ask Mennonite questions or whatever, and you don't have to be. I mean, it's not really a sensitive topic for me. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I was like,
You don't seem very bashful.
No,
I'm
I
just
don't
saying, cut loose.
yeah.
We can talk.
I will say if anyone has a question about it, feel free to put it in the comments. We'll get around to it. Because sure, listen. If you say that you're a Mennonite, I hope you'd be willing to answer some questions about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So you started this band. What band did you start or join in as an 18-year-old?
It was a band called Forward Son, and it was a bunch of older guys, well, not older guys, but in their 40s. Um, and they were all either Mennonite or Mennonite adjacent. So what it meant is what but it is a big distinction because it's a lot different. It's a lot different. It was a lot different for me coming up than it was for, like, some of the other guys in the scene, like John Rossi or Hunter Root or Kevin Cole, some of these other musicians in this area, because I got really fortunate in the fact that whenever my band played, just because we were in that culture, there'd be 500 people show up just because there was something going on, not necessarily because we were good, because Lord knows we weren't, but it was just there was something going on and we were what's going on. And so then there was a bunch of people. And so you get kind of spoiled because I never had to sweat it out at the Abbey bar, for 3 hours, making $50 or whatever. I never had to be part of the because I still hate the bar culture, just the loud,
The
nobody's
deafening. Yep.
listening. Yeah, it wasn't like that in my first band experiences, and because of being in the Mennonite thing, we would get asked to go to like Ohio and Indiana and travel some. So I got some experience like on the road really before I had the talent to back it up. But because you're a part of that networking community, it gave me those opportunities.
So were you writing songs at that time, or were you just
Yeah,
playing?
very poorly. I was writing them, um, some bad songs, some stuff that's kind of still decent. But yeah, I was writing. Not on the not as seriously. I wasn't approaching it as seriously as I do now. Back then it was like if I got an idea, I wrote it.
Mm.
And now I write whether I have an idea or not, because that's how you get good. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Mhm.
Because if you wait for inspiration to strike, um, either it just won't strike or you'll get an idea and then your pen won't be sharp enough to get it down. Like I feel like
Mm.
you have to write even if you don't have anything to write about, and even if it's a garbage song, fine. You just don't show it to anybody. And then when you get a good idea, then your brain's ready to write. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just like anything, writing is a skill.
Yeah.
You have to write all your bad ideas first to get a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, the trick is just
That's right.
knowing which ones are bad.
That's
Being
exactly right.
self-aware enough to be like, "Yeah, it was garbage, man." Yeah.
So at what point did you so you did that. What next for you?
Well, so I moved out. I grew up in Lancaster County, and I moved out of the area. I bought some land when I was 18. I bought about 10 acres in Juniata County because I wanted to.
18, you bought 10 acres of
Yeah, I
land.
didn't cash it off, but I had a buddy that had 10 acres, and he financed it for me, and I was like, and probably one of the kindest things anybody's ever done for me, because he literally, I mean, he signed the deed over to me and said, "Yeah, pay me every month," and cool. So anyway, so I bought 10 acres in Juniata County, which is where I live now. I'm not on that property, but so I moved out of the area, and that was when I was 18, or no, I moved out of the area when I was 20 and married my wife Beth, who I met in Juniata County when I was like 21. And at that point I was like, I was really wanting to be, I was a carpenter, but really wanting to be a full-time musician. And so Beth really started helping me think. She really believes in me more than I did at that point. And so she said, "You got to start thinking of yourself as a musician who's working as a carpenter, not a carpenter who wants to be a musician." And that
Mhm.
sounds like a really simple thing, but that's a big deal.
It's a big deal, yeah.
Big deal. Yeah. And so then ever after that, I was just like, okay, so how can I do this? And then the natural step forward seemed to be like, go where people are making music. And so my original goal was to be an audio engineer, because at that point I didn't think I was good enough to be a songwriter or an artist. I was like, yeah, I'm okay, but so I was like, well, I can sit behind the knobs, I could be in the studio just to be around it. Um, so I was gonna go to Belmont University to get an audio engineering degree. So I did some gen eds at Penn State campus in Lewistown and online some um, in preparation. And then we toured the Belmont campus and we were like, cool, yeah, tuition's like 50 grand a year or something. And that was 6, 7 years ago. It's probably
Up
another
a
time
little
and a
up,
half.
yep.
Yeah. And then I had some friends that were like, dude, it's really not necessary. And, you'll become a sound engineer and then you won't be working on the White Album every day. It's going to be a lot of garbage, or at least stuff you don't enjoy. And so I got talked out of that. and just moved to town to learn to write songs because you don't need a degree to write songs. You just can't suck. You just have to be able to write songs. And I can do that, man.
So at what point did you really break through in your songwriting technique?
I don't think I ever have yet.
No, not really.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, I did this writers workshop that kind of changed things for me. There was an old gospel. If you're into gospel music, there's a powerhouse writer. It's a lady named Dottie Rambo, fucking Dottie Rambo. And this is old school. This is like 50s, 60s. Anyways, her daughter Reba had a songwriters workshop she was doing at her house, and um, just helped me approach songwriting more as a craft instead of something that just happens. Like
Mm.
being able to, like we did exercise, like we would each take a Home Depot color swatch and write a song based on the color. Like what you look at that thing and either maybe the name or the color itself or whatever. Being able to pull inspirations from like weird places and learning how to actually work on being a songwriter. Um and that was in 2017, I guess. Yeah, 2016, I think 2017. And that's when I started getting really good because I was doing it, because instead of because I hear a lot of songwriters, and if I apologize if you're a songwriter listening to this and this is your process, but a lot of songwriters will say, "Oh, it'll just hit me. I just have to wait till something hits me." And I'm like, dude, if you wait till something hits you, you're never gonna write anything worth hearing most of the time because it's like you're not working on it hard enough for that idea to come. The idea might be great, but the craft won't be there, and you'll get in the way of your idea.
Mm.
Yeah, whatever that means.
So, and around that time, you went to Nashville and got in the loop a little bit over there.
Yeah, that was 2018 New Year's Day. Okay, that's a crazy story. So I was a carpenter, and I was like, I want to move to Nashville, but I was also aware of how very cliche that is. And so I was like, well, to make it a little less cliche, I'm gonna refuse I'm not gonna wait tables, and I'm not gonna be a carpenter. If I move to Nashville, I'm gonna do something that I could only do in Nashville, so that if I'm a failure as a songwriter, I can at least have this experience of whatever. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to get a job at the Grand Ole Opry, like as a janitor or a ticket guy or
Just something.
just something. So in November before I moved down, I got in touch with a manager. I applied for a job, got in touch with a manager down there, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I've got a job for you." I think it was like a groundskeeper of some kind, like garbage man or something really jankety. But it was like it didn't matter because I was like, I'll get in there, and then the manager will like me, and I'll move up, and it'll be fine.
Mhm.
So he's like, "Yeah, call me when you roll into town, and I'll get you started." Um, so I loaded up my stuff, and we moved down. And the day after I moved in, I called the manager and I said, "Hey, man, my name's Conrad, and we talked in November, and I'm ready to start working." And he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Conrad. I'm ready to start working." He said, "I don't remember you at all." So I was in Nashville and had no job and like devastated because I was excited about having a job at the Opry. So, one of my friends, an older lady that lived down there, one of my only friends, the only one of 2 people that I knew in town, she worked at a funeral home. And so I was like, "Well, could you get me a job there?" And she said, "Sure." So she got me an interview, um, and they paid me $10 an hour. And worst job I ever had by far. And I was doing like janitor work. I would clean the hearses, fuel the hearses, um deliver death certificates from, like, the doctor from the okay, so the funeral home would initiate a death certificate and take it to the doctor to be signed, and then you'd have to take it to the Department of Health to get. And believe it or not, that's one of the most important things a funeral home does because people get scrappy about a death certificate because to split up the money, you've gotta have the death
Yep.
certificate. So if a fight breaks out, they've had to call the cops to the funeral home, and it's usually about an estate dispute. I mean, that stuff happens. Anyway, so I was doing that and taking bodies to the crematorium, like loading them up in a Sprinter van in cardboard boxes and taking them to the crematorium to be burned for $10 an hour.
Yeah.
And looking back, I was like, I don't know what drove me, um, like why I put up with that kind of treatment, because it was a wealthy funeral home. I don't know why I tolerated it, but I did. Um, and my wife got a job at, she's a registered nurse. She got a job at the hospital in Franklin, Williamson Memorial Hospital. Um, and so that helped with as far as income went. But yeah, it was kind of brutal. So then I just struggled around, and this was pre-COVID. So to meet songwriters, I would just go to. I mean, there's a hit songwriter on every corner in
Let's say,
Tennessee.
go to
Yeah.
Broadway, you'll find
Well, not
50.
weirdly enough, Broadway is like not kind of like a horrible. I mean, it's not horrible. If you want to get drunk and listen to some honky tonks, it's great. But the guys the guys I was seeking out, because I'm kind of an old soul, were the older writers, and they're not on Broadway, but they do rounds, songwriter rounds all over the place down there. And so you could meet Hall of Famers just by going to their shows, and they'd talk to you and meet with you and hang out with you. And so that's how I kind of got in the loop.
And so what'd you do then? You went around to these songwriting rounds, and somewhere someone met you and said, "Hey, look at this guy."
Yeah, so the first guy I met in town kind of was a guy named Fred Knobloch, and I met him through. It's gonna be a lot of names that really don't matter, but I went to the Bluebird Cafe. Have you heard of the Bluebird
I
Cafe?
have not.
Okay, it's like this songwriters cafe where a lot of people like. It's a really famous listening room in Tennessee where really great songwriters play their stuff. And so that's a place I try to hang out as much as possible. And I met a guy named Don Schlitz. And Don Schlitz wrote, if you're a country music fan, is "I'm gonna love you forever, forever and ever, amen." Or "You
Mhm.
got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold." You know that
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
Yeah. So he's that guy. Don Schlitz and Jelly Roll Johnson, they were playing the Bluebird, and they introduced me to a songwriter named Fred Knobloch. And Fred Knobloch is another hit songwriter, but he was doing song critiques. So you take 20 songs to him, and he'll say, "Well, this is too short. This is too long. This sucks. This chorus is bad." Really, he's a real curmudgeon, but he's very good at what he does.
Curmudgeon.
Curmudgeon,
That's a
yeah.
$5 word.
Yeah, it is a $5 word. But he anyway, so he was like, he told me, he's like, "You're not Nashvilleized yet. You're still kind of creative." He's like, and I started writing with him, and then I was listening to a podcast called Spotlight on Songcraft, Spotlight on Songwriters, and there was a guest there named Dickie Lee, and he just sounded really cool. And Dickie wrote the song for George Jones, "She Thinks I Still Care," which was like a massive hit for George Jones, and then it was a massive hit for Anne Murray, and then Elvis cut it. It was like number one 3 times in the '60s, and he's got a bunch of hits. I think 8 number ones and maybe 20 top 10s, something like that. And so Fred introduced me to Dickie, and then Dickie Lee, he was about 83 at the time. Um, and we hit it off right from the beginning. We started writing together, and Dickie, even if he wasn't current in the, in other words, he's not writing hits that you hear on the radio now, but he was still able. He's still very well connected. Like one day he called Universal, like the Universal, and he's like, "There's this kid. Can he come and play some songs?" And I didn't get the deal with Universal, but it was still like he would do stuff like that for me, even if he wasn't like current. He still had those strings where he could call
Right,
people
yeah.
there and help you out. Yeah, and then it's just one thing leads to the next. Dickie introduced me to Roger Cook, and Roger wrote like, "I'd like to teach the world to sing perfect harmony," that old Coke commercial. "Long cool woman in a black dress. Da, 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 da." Yeah. So and then it's just like anything else, dude. It's just like if you're not a jerk and people like you and you perform well and do your job, they'll be like, "Oh man, you should meet my friend," whatever. And so I kind of got into that got to be friends with some of these older guys, whose songs I grew up listening to, and it's kind of crazy because some of these guys are in their 80s, 70s, and 80s, and are more accessible than I thought they'd be because a lot of younger guys don't give a rip. I mean, some people do,
Mm.
but there's not a lot of 25-year-olds knocking down, Dickie Lee's door or Bob McDill or Roger or these older guys because they just don't care. But that's the music I like, and so those are the people I sought out. So once I got the first once I got my foot in the door and made 2 friends, then all you gotta do is ask them, "Hey, do you have, this guy's number or that guy's number?" And they'll give it to you, and they'll say, "Hey, well, I'll just call him for you, or we can go out for breakfast." And then they'll help you network. If you but you just gotta not suck the whole time. It's like you got if you get to write with those guys, you have to show up with a good idea, and you have to, um, just like literally every other job, just, do your job and do it well and show up. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Luck is just preparedness meets opportunity.
Yeah.
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 So what all came out of that? You did a record?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple false starts, as far as that goes, like, I mean, the weird thing about Nashville is there's a lot of people, not yeah, there's a lot of sharks, but there's even just good people looking for just like there's artists looking for a break, there's publishers and labels
Mm.
and managers and stuff like that looking for the next big thing. And what I think a lot of artists forget when they're in that position is that a manager needs a good artist way more than an artist needs a good manager.
Mhm.
And we get desperate and sign any contract that comes along, and then you get into these things where they own you for life or
It's a big problem.
it's a big whatever, yeah, whatever the deal is. So there was a couple of weird, kind of false starts and whatever, but just um the longer you're there, the more your network builds, and you just keep showing up and doing your job, and people will come um and catch your vision and want to work with you and those kinds of things. And that's how I met. I mean, I got a publishing deal, and it's too many names in a row. Like the network from the first guy that I met in Nashville to my publisher maybe has 10 people at least in there. This guy introduced me to this guy, 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 who introduced me to my publisher. Um, and yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just a lot of hard work.
Well, that's great. I mean, because it just goes to show that how willing you have to be, or how not desperate, how persistent you
Yeah,
have to
you
be.
can say
We
desperate.
can.
You can say well, it's like, dude, I don't know if I mean, it's like I feel like being a songwriter or a musician is almost like a sickness because it's like you're just not happy doing anything else. And sometimes I felt really stupid about that. It's like, well, why? Like, I should just behave myself and go build cabinets or just why do you have to? But it's just, I'm just not happy doing anything else. I just get bored. And so, didn't really have a plan B. I just want to be successful doing this. And when it's when the craft is an end in itself, your chances of succeeding are much higher. In other words, yeah, it's fun getting paid now to play music, but I'd be playing music whether or not I get paid, or you know what I
Mm,
mean?
mhm.
Because it's just fun, and it's that difficult that it has to be that way or you won't be successful.
Right. So we have a few of your demos here that you later gave to other musicians. Tell me a little bit about that. Um, with the wildflower.
Play the Wildwood Flower?
Play the wildflower.
Yeah, okay, well, can we start with Living Left to Do?
I don't think we have
Oh,
that
that's
one
fine. Okay,
actually.
that's okay. So the my publisher is a guy named Matt Lindsey and his partner in business, Jeff Gordon. But Matt started. I was playing at the Station Inn one night, and sitting in with Jim Rooney and the Irregulars, and he heard me and he wanted to work with me, and so he pitched a song of mine, called "Living Left to Do" to a bluegrass band called Joe Mullins and the Radio Ramblers. And I don't know if this is interesting to anybody, but, like, when you pitch in songs, it's like the artist and the publisher and the songwriters. The artists typically go to publishers looking for songs, and a publisher might have 5 to 50 writers depending on if you're like a boutique company or Sony.
Mm.
So, when you get a publishing deal, it just means that you're digging with a shovel now instead of your bare hands. It's like your publisher knows who's cutting, who's recording, and what they're looking for, so you can pitch intelligently. So Matt Lindsey started pitching my songs, started working my material, and so he got one of my songs cut with Joe Mullins and the Radio Ramblers, and it went to number one. It was like number one on the bluegrass gospel charts for maybe 4 weeks, and so that kind of got my foot in the door. Now people actually open my emails and like, I mean, I'm not, because it's really hard to get people to listen to your songs if you have nothing. You know what I mean? It's really difficult. So anyway, so that it's the same band that cut "Live and Left to Do" is cut this next song you're gonna play, "Play the Wildwood Flower," and this just came out on the 17th of March. And I wrote this song about an Amish couple. There was a studio. I do studio work, record people for part of my living, and I had a client who told me that his mom married his dad because his dad could play the Wildwood Flower on the guitar, and I was like, "Man, if that don't sound like a country song." And for those of you who don't know, Wildwood Flower is like a classic Carter family instrumental. If you're in like bluegrass or country music, that's the first song you learn how to pick on the guitar. Um, anyway, so I wrote this song and I sent it to Joe Mullins because he knew me already because he had a hit with one of my previous songs, and he put it on hold and recorded it, and we'll see what it does. I'm hoping they single it and it goes number one because I really like the song, but it's kind of too early to tell because it just came out. But so this is the demo that I sent to Joe, and then if y'all go on YouTube, where it's playing on the radio now on Bluegrass Junction, but you can look it up and find their version online.
So this is Conrad Fisher's "Play the Wildwood Flower."
He lived by the river where the willow trees were growing. Met her on a Sunday and he loved her from the start. She lived on the mountain where the wind was always blowing. But 20 miles of mountain road don't matter to the heart. And every night he'd ask politely, "Is there anything that'll make you smile?" And every time she whispers softly, "Oh my darling, play the wildwood flower." They married in the early spring as soon as they were able, making plans to build a home as soon as they could start. He kept a fire in hearth and food upon the table. 50 years or more, they never spent a day apart. And every night he'd ask politely, "Is there anything that'll make you smile?" And every time she whispers softly, "Oh my darling, play the wildwood flower." Early one December morn, winter came a-calling. Not a thing was stirring there in the old home place. They found him by the fireside, the flame no longer burning. She was holding to his hand, a smile upon her face. 'Cause every night he'd ask politely, "Is there anything that'll make you smile?" And every time she whispers softly, "Oh my darling, play the wildwood flower." When the wind blows through the willows, watch for moonlight dancing on the ground. If you only listen closely, softly, you may hear the wildwood flower.
And that was Conrad Fisher's demo of "Play the Wildwood Flower."
Yeah, man.
So you also went and wrote original music that you put out as yourself.
Yeah.
And so tell me what that was like.
What it was like recording it or what?
Yes, but before I get that, I wanna ask you a question. What's the difference between you writing a song for someone else and writing a song for yourself?
As far as the actual doing it or like the psychology of it or the money or what do you mean?
All of it.
All of it. Well, I mean, so that's a good question. It's really difficult because I've found kind of like a lane in bluegrass music. Because country music these days is not really my thing either. And so when you boy, I have to think through how I want to answer this. It's like if you're writing for a specific artist, you just kind of you kind of approach an idea a certain way. Cause like, okay, Morgan Wallen is not gonna sing a song like Play the Wildwood Flower. It's just
Right.
not gonna happen. So if you get a tip that Morgan Wallen is looking for a song about, tailgates and girls, like you're gonna obviously have to approach that differently or not approach it at all in my case. So there's like this battle of like, do I write stuff that I think is good art and that I would sing, or do I want to write something that I think could get cut?
Mm.
And so in bluegrass, I feel like that intersects more often than on like country radio right now. And it kind of sucks because like I really want to be in the country market, but I'm not willing to write drivel or I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not like I'm just not gonna write. And the crazy thing is sometimes a great song sneaks through, like Flower Shops by Ernest or The House That Built Me from, maybe about a decade ago. But I guess the difference is sometimes when I'm writing, I have an idea that I know nobody else is gonna want, but that I'll be able to sell. Like I've got a song called Being Human. Um, Falling in love, falling apart, losing your mind, breaking your heart. There's nothing to fear. It's just kind of weird being human. And that's not nobody can pull that off but Conrad Fisher. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're not gonna pitch that to nobody. But I still think it's good. So like you just kind of have to, I usually kind of know when I'm writing the idea if this is something that I'm gonna be able to pitch or if it's something that I'm gonna want for me. And sometimes the trap you fall into as a songwriter is sometimes you end up writing too much for other people. You try to
Mm.
write too much for the pitch and you kind of lose the purity of it. Um, and like Play the Wildwood Flower, that song I just wrote, that was for me. I mean, I knew I could pitch that after I wrote it, but I was writing that for me. But then it just so happened that it's like, oh, this might work for someone else. And I feel like that's when you get the best stuff is when you're writing for you, but then it also happens that you could pitch it to somebody else. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But then like I just had a situation where my artist my publisher gave me a tip on an artist who's cutting, which I don't think I better say it publicly yet, but they gave me a topic that they were writing that they wanted to sing about and who the artist was. I wrote a song, we pitched it the next day, and they put it on hold, like within 24 hours of the song being written. So like but that happens really rarely. But I still want to be able to do that. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but it's something I kind of struggle with a little bit, to lose trying not to lose focus. Like it's kind of easy as a songwriter to just try to write to get cuts. And I
Mhm.
feel like you can really kind of hijack yourself um when you do that.
So tell me about Trouble with the Hammer.
Oh yeah, I wrote that cuz I mean, um that was me being mad that I had to swing a hammer to make a living. It's like, I was because I had promised myself when I moved to Tennessee that I wasn't going to be a carpenter because I was like, I can be a carpenter in
Anywhere.
Pennsylvania, anywhere. And in Nashville, it's like I didn't know the guys at the hardware store or the bank, or it's just so much harder when you don't have that network. And it was just kind of a pride thing. I was like, no, man, I ain't gonna be a carpenter. But I found myself because I had never sold I have a little a property in Pennsylvania, so I was paying 2 mortgages, and that's hard to do, even if your wife is a nurse on $10 an hour. So I had to do something that paid well. And so that song was like, I mean, the first verse is, don't have trouble with a hammer or a 50-hour week. I can swing them both if I need to, but I've been working every day and walking in my sleep, and lately it's been wearing me down. It's like, yeah, every word of that's true because I was working all day and then I'd need to go to a gig to try to network with publishers and songwriters and musicians. And just then the chorus is just like expressing that, like, I don't actually want to get rich. I just want to like do what I love for a living. It's like I don't really want a Cadillac. Like as far as material things go, I have everything. I could waste money on a 55 Cadillac or something stupid, but I don't actually have things that I don't want a Maserati. Like I just actually don't want one. I don't want a gold watch. Like what are you gonna do with that? Like I have
Got what you need.
Yeah, I got what I need. But it'd be nice to not be swinging a hammer. So that's what the song's about.
And this is the music video of yours.
Yeah, so the audio, I should have just sent you the MP3 of the actual thing, but if y'all can check out the music video, we had fun. We shot that at my farm. My neighbor Mike lent me his, I think it's a 56 Cadillac. It's 50s something. And then my other neighbor lent me his Farmall Cub, and we shot a video with my band in my backfield. So check it out on YouTube, but this is the audio, I guess. One, two, three, four, one. Don't have trouble with the hammer or a 50-hour week. Oh, I can swing them both if I need to. But I've been working every day and walking in my sleep, and lately it's been wearing me down. I don't want to live high in the Beverly Hills, but I hope I get to visit them someday. I don't need a lot of money, don't buy my thrills. I just want to live life my way. I just want to live life my way. Well, I hate to complain or get down in the mouth, but I surely could use a vacation. I'm gonna pack up my bags, gonna point the car south. I'll see ya when I see you around. I don't wanna live high in the Beverly Hills, but I hope I get to visit them someday. I don't need a lot of money, don't buy my thrills. I just wanna live life my way. I just wanna live life my way. I'm gonna seize the day, take the time somewhere sunny. I can slow it down. I don't wanna live high in the Beverly Hills, but I hope I get to visit them someday. I don't need a lot of money, don't buy my thrills. I just wanna live life. I don't wanna live high in the Beverly Hills, but I hope I get to visit them someday. I don't need a lot of money, don't buy my thrills. I just wanna live life my way. I just wanna live life my way.
Now Was Trouble with a Hammer by Conrad Fisher. Dude, what a great song.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. So recently, and it was really funny. I said it beforehand. Why own a Cadillac when you can borrow one?
Yeah.
So you just acquired a great venue. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, man. So I live in Juniata County, which is like about an hour from Harrisburg in Pennsylvania, and I was having breakfast with a songwriter friend of mine, another great talent named Willie Markley, who lives close to me. And he's like, "Man, did you see the McCoysville Presbyterian Church is for sale?" And I was like, "What?" So I went and checked it out, and it's absolutely stunning, man. It was like built in 1871. I don't know what the height is at its peak, but it's at least 40, 50, probably 50 feet. It's 20 foot or 20-foot ceilings and 2 stories. And I was like, man, it had been on the market for 60 days and didn't seem like anybody was really interested in it. And I had been kind of needing a studio space away from the house. I have a 1-year-old son, or he's 1.5 now, but at the time he was about 1. and it's getting difficult to have clients at my house studio, and just kind of unprofessional, honestly, because and harder on my wife because she has to keep the baby quiet and all that.
That's hard.
Yeah, it's hard and it's not necessary. Anyway, so I started looking into it, and at first it was like kind of like an impossibility. Like, I can't swing this. But I just started dreaming and walking towards it, and I ended up being able to buy it in November of 2022. The congregation itself started in 1773.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was down the road, because I have an acre and a half there with this building, and it's all flat and no graveyard. Because they started first they were in open air, and it was a circuit riding preacher named William Logan, started this church, and what I understand, he had a little tent to stand under, and they drug logs out of the woods to sit on. Um, and then they did that for about 8 years, which is shocking to me because you can hardly pay people to go to church anymore. And these people were
Right.
like,
These are dedicated people.
Scots-Irish settlers, yeah. And so then they built a log cabin in 1801, I think it was, and were in that till about 1836. And then they built a frame church, and that burnt down around the time of the Civil War. And so then in 1871, they moved the church into town, into McCoysville, which was then a thriving town, had a mill and um, couple of stores, a doctor, a post office. I mean, it was, quintessential small town America. Yeah. And I mean, it cost them $10,000 to build it in 1871. And I've got some pictures from the 20s, which would have been their 50th anniversary, where it's about 150 people out front of this church. I mean, it's crazy the legacy that place has. And there were still people meeting in there when I bought it, the same congregation. It was their last Sunday was Sunday, November 20th, and I bought it on the 21st. There was about 8 people still attending, and it was just older folks, and it was just getting to be too much for them to keep up. So I told them what my vision was for the place and what I wanted to do down there, and they were excited about it and happy that someone was coming in and wanting to do something like that with it, because it's McCoysville, Mifflintown, Juniata County. It's not a depressed area, but it's there's not a whole lot of opportunities as far as other than some blue collar jobs. There's you're not gonna. It's a difficult place for a young person to grab a hold and
Do something.
yeah, to really do something. I mean, like the closest theater, I think from my house, like movie theater, um, it's at least 45 minutes.
No.
The closest Walmart is about a half hour.
Wow.
But we are right off 322, so it's like it's
So you can go places.
yeah, you can go places, and it's not, and honestly, it's beautiful enough that I don't mind the drive. But as far as that goes, it allowed me to get the building at a price that I could manage, and yeah. So I have the sanctuary is on the second floor, and it's got the old pews. It was gorgeous. It's if you see pictures of it, it's exactly as pretty as the pictures. And then the first floor, when you go right in the door, is like the community hall, which I now have my studio down there. And then I put a shower, and I have a wood stove, and I have a bed. I didn't build a bedroom yet, but that's my next project, probably this month, just to frame up a bedroom so there's some privacy. Because I have clients from out of state, Indiana. Well, Dickie Lee was actually my first client, man. He was he's a Hall of Famer, man. I was like, yeah, this is cool. He wrote a song with Keith Whitley, which if you're into bluegrass or country, that means something to you. But he wrote a song with Keith Whitley that they had never done a really good demo on. And he's like, man, I'm gonna bring this up and do a demo for me. I was like, yeah, man. So that was my first client, and I have guys from South Carolina or Indiana or Ohio, or just even if it's 3 or 4 hours away, it's just nice for someone to be able to crash there. And the vibe is really cool, man. I mean, it's like it's an old church and a big functional, kitchen, and I have coffee and snacks and a big fridge, and it's just it's fun to be there. And so just to check out and go down the rabbit hole with some music for a couple days, I think people like that, to just immerse themselves in it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So What are some of the big events that you're excited for that? It's called Ragamuffin Hall.
Yeah, Ragamuffin Hall.
Why Ragamuffin Hall?
Well, a lot of my friends are strange, weird, kind of ragamuffin characters, and I just want that place to be I want the hall to be a place where everybody feels welcomed, um, in spite of their not only in spite of their quirks, but because of their quirks. And one of the chiefest of the ragamuffins, the original ragamuffin, was a buddy of mine named Malachi Martin, and he was just one of those guys. He grew up in a situation similar to me in a conservative church, and went off the deep end a little bit, and world traveler, and kind of got crazy. Um, and he's kind of the patron saint of Ragamuffin Hall, and he died on a motorcycle wreck last summer. Not far. This is actually his necklace. I wear this everywhere I go. In his memory, but he died in a motorcycle wreck right by my house last summer. And so it's like it's these people on the fringes that I want that I hope they feel welcome at the hall. That's why I named it. That's why I named it that. I forget what the question was. That the question?
That was the follow-up question, but the
What
first
was
question
it?
I asked was, what events are you excited for to put on
Oh,
there?
yeah. So, well, to start off, we've been having um hymn sings. We actually just had one last night where it's just nothing fancy, but I brew a pot of coffee and people bring cookies and we sing hymns. I lead from the front. It's not a show. It's just we just get hymn
Worship.
books. Yeah. Um, but the first big event, and this is actually I guess the first time this is actually publicly publicized. The Malpas brothers are coming in July 28th, and they're like a classic country duo, and they recorded one of my songs. Me and Dickie Lee and Chris Malpas wrote a song they have on their upcoming record. So I've gotten to be kind of friends with them, and they're going to be like the first big artist to be in there. They were just on the Grand Ole Opry last week, I think. And they're really popular in my neck of the woods, and like country is all get out. Like where you see them, you see a video of them, and you're like, is that a shtick or are they actually that country? And it's like, no, they're actually more country than that. It's like, but they're really cool, and so I'm really excited to have them there. Tickets are on sale on the website is theragaMuffinHall.com. Tickets are on sale right now. I've been selling them privately. Because I wanted the neighbors. The show will sell out, and I've been making sure the neighbors and
Community.
the community
Yeah.
has first chance. Yeah, so I've been selling them at the hymn sings, and everybody that knows me knows to come to me for a ticket, word of mouth or whatever. So I've sold a good handful of them.
I want a ticket.
You want a ticket? So yeah, so they're on sale at theragaMuffinHall.com right now, and it's all still I don't know what I'm doing, honestly. As far as like running a venue or any of this, I just know what I like, and I want to bring that to the community. And so the other thing that's been really cool is like the Malpas brothers, for instance, has their a booking fee. Like, okay, I want to get high quality acts in, and high quality acts usually have high quality booking fees. But what I've discovered is there's local businesses that believe in the same things I do and are willing to for the good of the community help out. Yeah, so the sponsors for the Malpas brothers on July 28th are BK Kaufman Construction and Juniata Concrete, both companies that I've worked with or know the owners, and they were like, "Hey, let's make this happen," and helped with the cost. But yeah, I mean, because you got to think about, I can see like 180 people in there, and so a typical band, if they're like a nationally touring band or whatever, their booking fee is going to be anywhere from 5 to 20,000, and to make that work in McCoysville out of 180 seats, you start doing the math, and it's like, oh, it's
It's a
but
project.
yeah, it's a project, but So it's I'm learning, man, and I'm just kind of one step at a time. The cool thing is that you know the venue can be a little bit experimental for me. It's not like my groceries are coming from the venue bit of it. I do full time studio work, and so I can afford to experiment a little bit with the venue side of things, and I don't have to be, you know,
Really worried about it.
yeah, yeah,
It's always good.
yeah,
So we're gonna go into a time of random questions that not random. I wrote all these out for all the artists that I have on.
okay,
But one thing you mentioned something earlier that caught me, and it's the ego thing.
yeah.
You think it's bad for people, and yet here you are as a singer songwriter, sometimes performing in these big areas. How do you deal with that?
But good question. Yeah, I think it's bad. I mean, I could be wrong on this. I'm not a psychologist, but I don't think human beings are made to stand in front of other human beings and be clapped at. Like for you to
Like
stand,
worship.
yeah, I guess you could call it that. Like I don't think it's a healthy thing for 1,000 people to be clapping for people on stage. Like that's I don't think we're meant. Our brains aren't meant to handle that. I don't think they are. And so it's like, so now what's the question?
How do you
How do
deal
I
with that as a singer songwriter performer?
Well, part of it, is just like I know I'm very aware at how much I suck sometimes, and so just like keeping a realistic like think about how uh people in the audience, people your fans or your followers or whatever, they only ever see you at your very very best.
Mm.
They only see you when you're on stage and there's lights and smoke and or when you're in the studio doing a podcast or whatever. They only see you when they
Yeah,
don't
when
s
you're turned on, right?
yeah, when you're
Yeah.
on and they don't hear y'all don't hear the crappy songs I write because I don't put them out. And so, like, when I think you just have to keep perspective of that and have people around you who are real people and who will keep you in check. Not who will say how lousy you are, but just be self-aware and try to see yourself, how God sees you. It's like, "Oh, you wrote a pretty song, good for you. I made the whole universe." It's like just
Right.
kinda, um, yeah, just keeping that in perspective, and I guess the biggest thing is having people allowing people close to you who you trust to be able to speak into your life and keep you kinda on the straight and narrow. Because I mean, it is kind of a weird thing to deal with, and I think you see it all the time. That's why artists get crazy and why people die when they're 27 because they're, drink themselves to death
Or whatever.
or drugs or whatever it is, because there's these coping mechanisms that you develop from that. I mean, because I kind of I'm learning the deeper I get into it is like, okay, for instance, on tour, we just did like a East Coast tour, and there was one night where um we did a show in Florida, in Sarah Berkey Square in Florida. There was maybe, I don't know, 800 people there. And then we had to hop in the bus and drive 15 hours and then be in Kentucky and do another show the next night. And so like you're off of a high of like 800 people being fully engaged with you and your band and digging it, and then you've got to drive through the night and do the same thing over again the next night without sleeping. And so it's like there's a lot of things going on there. There's like the adrenaline of all that of the performance, and then uh yeah, there's just a lot. There's a lot. And it's like I was driving and I was like, "Oh, this is why people do drugs." I could use a line of cocaine right now. Can we say like I mean, and it gave
Right.
me empathy. I can see how it happens because it's like if you don't have. Luckily, I had a pastor from Texas who was scared for my health and safety and talked for me on the phone like 10 hours just to keep me awake. Okay, so I don't have to turn to substances, but because I have people around me. That's another thing I'm really strict with in my band. Like when I hire people in my contract, it's like if I catch my guys with alcohol at at a gig, they're fired immediately, like no questions
Mm.
asked. Like everybody's sober all the time. And rehearsals, the same way. Like just because when you start adding substances to all the crazy stuff that's already going on in your head and your body after a show like that, and then it's just like
Things
never
fall
good.
apart
Yeah,
very
things
quickly.
fall apart. Yeah, and so I try to you know live a lifestyle that allows me to manage that without artificial things. That's
So here's a question that one of the watchers will ask. This comes from Joshua Be Good, not Johnny Be Good. That's a
Hey,
different song.
Joshua. Yeah, he's
Um,
he's followed me for a long time or a while.
so he asked, and this was kind of answered in your story, but I'm curious because you grew up in an a cappella church. Why not go that route as opposed to bluegrass?
Going to acapella stuff?
Yeah.
Well, because if you're doing acapella, it's not very, with one voice as a performer, it just doesn't really work. And it's not really the genre that I like really thrive in anyways. Like acapella music, it's going to be more chamber music and um orchestral stuff, and that's just not my vibe. I really appreciate it and enjoy it, but I've always been too much of a free spirit to just sing what somebody else wrote down for me to sing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like acapella music, I love church music. I love that in church and like, Handel's Messiah. Like I love classical music, but as far as a performer, it's just not me. You know what I mean?
Right. So here's a question then. I like to ask all my Christian brethren this. What is worship to you? Where do you find yourself worshiping God the most? What action? What?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know, man. I think when you're just living your purpose, like doing what you believe God wants you to be doing, um, to me, that's worship. And so that can be cleaning a toilet or it can be doing a podcast or whatever. Like this morning, it was Palm Sunday. I wasn't at church this morning. I probably should have been. I think I actually missed communion at my church, which kind of bums me out. But I was, there's a guy named Josh Gibble. I just bought a church in Lancaster, similar. Well, it's a lot nicer than. I mean, it's got stained glass in the works. Very nice church. So I went to visit him this morning. That was worship for me because it was like hanging out with a guy that.
Fellowship.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, church. This is gonna maybe sound bad, but church and worship are sometimes I define them differently because for me, the church I go to has more to do with community. Yes, I worship when I'm at church, but if you expect.
If you only worship at church and
Yeah,
you only have church when you worship,
yeah,
it's not good.
yeah, yeah, and so I go to church, and because I like the guys I go to church with, it's more about the community of it and having guys that'll keep you accountable,
Mhm.
like keeping, and by that I mean if they're like if they see me performing somewhere they don't think I should be, or if I'm neglecting my family because I'm on the road or whatever, just you need to have people around you who have the authority to speak into your life and keep you in check.
Mhm.
And that's not something our generation wants to really hear or
No, it's
do
not.
much because it's not always fun, but I think
It's necessary.
it's necessary unless you just want to. And I think people that don't have those people, that kind of community, they go off the deep end.
And they're not happy.
Yeah, and you're not happy anyways. And I do that, and I know my own weaknesses well enough to know that I need people like that, um, in my life. Yeah.
So then the last question I'll ask, and then we'll get to the Rob and the play out.
Oh yeah.
What is one of the funniest or worst things that ever happened to you at a gig?
This was this man. This was kind of wild. I got asked to play a birthday party in West Virginia. And I didn't have a band at the time, I was just doing solo, and so, anyways, I showed up, and this is not a word of a lie, but it ended up being a revival meeting. They had a white tent set up and everything, and I don't know if I had maybe 5 gospel songs on the whole set, and I was confused. I was so confused, and this was West Virginia, and they had an 8-point buck walking around like a dog, And that wasn't even the weird part. The weird part was that nobody
acknowledged it.
Yeah, it was just like, yeah, well, don't you have an 8-point buck in your backyard? You know what I mean? It was like kind of like that. And so this pastor, and the pastor wasn't even the pastor of the church that was running the revival meeting wasn't even the guy that booked me. It was someone that went to that church, and I still don't understand how it happened. But I went up to the pastor and I said, "Hey, I mean, I just found out this is a revival meeting." I said, I thought it was a birthday party. I prepared for a birthday party." And he said, "Well, this is all about saving souls tonight." And I was like, "Ooh." Um, anyway, so I made it work, but I drink out of these maple syrup jugs. My brother started a maple syrup, and it looks like a moonshine jug, but really it's just a big glass bottle, but it looks like but it's just I don't like drinking out of plastic, and I usually need at least a half a gallon during a show, and so that's the convenient thing to use, and it's kind of become a shtick. But anyways, I had this jug on stage, and this is West Virginia, and I kept swigging this thing, and the congregation was getting worried, like legitimately getting worried that I was drinking, which to me says way more about them than it does about me. And so I kept drinking, and I said, "Look, man, this is either water or I can drink you under the table." Like, cause I was, this
Yeah,
far
right,
deep.
right.
Anyways, this little old lady in the front row would not shut up about it. And so I was like, "You know what? You want to smell this? Do you want to smell my water?" Like, so she comes out. So she wants to smell it. So she uncorks the lid and she sniffs and she goes, "Woo!" Like that, like pretended it was moonshine. Anyways, and I never got invited back to that particular region of West Virginia. But that was one of the stranger gigs that I've ever had. Great people, and I think they still follow me on Facebook, so howdy. I love you guys still if you're watching this, but it was definitely one of the weirder things that's happened to me at a gig.
So tell me, we're gonna get back to the Robin as we play
Yeah.
out here, but tell me, where can people find you and your music and stuff like that?
They can find me on all streaming services. On Facebook, I've got a YouTube channel. Man, just look up old Conrad Fisher or Conrad Fisher Music. You'll find me anywhere. Um, but yeah, follow me on my socials and to stay updated about my career and Ragamuffin Hall and everything that's going on. That's where you can find me. You don't have to look very hard. I mean, I don't think you do.
Well, my name is Corey Rosen. This is the Story Podcast. You can find me and all of my projects at CoreyRosenProductions.com. That's CORYROSEN Productions.com. If you like this podcast and you want to help support me, the best way you can do so is by liking and following the page, or sharing this with your friends, or in sharing this with your musician friends, because I like to have any sort of musician on this show, not just Conrad Fisher. Although I love Conrad Fisher, he's a great guy. And so if you want to help me out in any way, that's how you can do so. You can go over to my website, like I said, and in the future, we're going to be having on a rapper from the urban scene here in Lancaster tomorrow. That's tomorrow at 10 o'clock. This Thursday, we're having on my very own college's performance center, the Trust Performing Arts Center, run by Aurelia Hoover, who is an incredible person in their own right. They schedule amazing classical guests that come into the old Fulton Bank downtown, and it's a really great venue, and we're going to learn all about that. This Friday, we have Dustin LeBlanc from West Shore Theater coming in and telling he's the operations or executive producing. He's a top dog over there.
Good save.
And we're going to learn about what all goes on there. And this Saturday, we're having Colt Wilbur come on.
Nice.
Yeah, Colt Wilbur, a really cool country guy. And we're going to learn more about him. With all that said, let's get over to a few more things I want to announce. The Story is starting up the Songwriter Studio, which I told you about. It's where I'm getting 3 or 4 other musicians around the table. We're going to write a song within an hour and ready to send to the production house and hopefully have an album by the end of the year. That's the goal.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Wow. Indeed. And so if you want to be a part of that, you can go over to our website and find it there. Also, we're doing single and album reviews on the show with other artists in the local area. So if you want to get your stuff reviewed and critiqued, you can be a part of that as well.
Nice.
And we're going to hear about the Robin.
Okay, this song, like I said, I grew up Mennonite, and my grandparents were Amish, and even if they didn't have instruments, they were still very, very musical family, like to sing. This is a song that my great grandma taught my grandma, who taught my mom, who taught to me. And I don't know where this thing comes from. I've played it for as many people as I possibly can, and nobody's ever heard it before. The only trace of it I found was in a reader from like 1850 or something. I found some of the like kind of similar words, but not even exact. Anyways, so I've put kind of polished it up from what I changed the last verse a little bit, but this is the melody that my mom taught me, and it's a real folk song. It's called The Robin, and it's one of my favorite songs ever. My mom used to sing this to me a lot when I was falling asleep, and now I sing it for my son Jack. So that's the story behind this one.
And let's listen to The Robin.
Oh, what is the matter with Robin that makes her cry round here all day? I think she must be in great trouble, said Swallow to Little Blue Jay. I think she must be in great trouble, said Swallow to Little Blue Jay. I know why the robin is crying, said Wren with a sob in her breast. A little bold robber has stolen 3 little blue eggs from her nest. A little bold robber has stolen 3 little blue eggs from her nest. I think he forgot that from heaven there looks down an all-seeing eye. I think he forgot that our Father hears the little robin's cry. I think he forgot that our Father hears the little robin's cry.